Recently I finished Nier Automata, the latest game by Yoko Taro, a director whose entire career has been plagued by esoteric game design choices and poorly allocated budgets. Playing through Nier Automata got me thinking about how it dealt with Ludonarrative Dissonance. For those unfamiliar with the term, it is defined by Wikipedia as conflicts between a video game's narrative and its gameplay. When making the claim for the validity of video games as an artistic medium, Ludonarrative Dissonance is often featured as a complaint, as a disconnect in an interactive medium can be especially disconcerting. This detachment between gameplay and narrative is common in many of gaming's most prolific titles. A popular example is the Uncharted franchise, with series lead Nathan Drake, who is supposed to be an easygoing, lovable hero, yet kills hundreds of people every game, with no repercussion to his mental health or any comment or concern from those around him. A more nuanced example could even be a simple series like Mario. If Mario falls off the stage or seemingly meets his end in any other way, he magically returns to the start of the level. This isn't explained or justified. Players kind of just roll with it because it's a game. This has been a common convention since the start of the industry. I'm not saying Mario or any other game is necessarily devalued for not marrying the franchise's respawn mechanics to its narrative. What if a game did? What if a game did that along with blending every other gameplay mechanic into its narrative near perfectly? And that's where Nier Automata comes in. Playing through the game, I realized that it had almost perfectly blended every aspect of its gameplay with its narrative. Nier Automata follows the story of three androids, 2B, 9S, and A2, and as such filters everything the player does throughout the entire game through the lens of an android. Everything you do in this game is justified through narrative means. This can obviously be applicable to very simple things, such as the playable characters being able to perform inhuman feats and can customize themselves. They are also programmed to kill the machines you are fighting throughout the story, so there is justification for the endless combat the player must endure. However, this justification can be applied to much more than basic examples like these. Take a common video game convention such as menus or loading screens. This is usually never explained at all. These are basically mandatory features a player must use in just about any game to further their experience due to the nature of the medium. However, in Nier Automata, the menus are an aspect of each android's operating system that they use to equip themselves new abilities or weapons. Adjusting settings in menus like brightness or sound are justified as the android seeing and hearing features that can be altered. There is even a cute section about this in the game between 2B and 9S. You can even remove their integral OS chip for a game over, as they can no longer function without an operating system. When the player starts up the game, it is synonymous to the android booting up themselves after being in sleep mode or shutdown. Saving and respawning is tied to the narrative by the Bunker, a space station on which all androids reside. The Bunker provides a backup of data for every android that they're all connected to wirelessly. This allows androids to store copies of their latest memory files. This way, if an android dies or the player chooses to reload, their latest memory file or latest save can be booted up, keeping most of the player's progress. This allows the player to respawn after a death as well. What's especially interesting is that there is a part in the story where the androids can't access their backup data. When this point is reached, dying in battle no longer results in a respawn, but in a game over, as your android cannot obtain their backup data anymore. Nier Automata even uses its gameplay and narrative in tandem to drive home emotional points in the story. Similar to the androids not being able to access their backup data anymore, there is a section where one of the androids is damaged incredibly badly and they lose most of their functionality. The player is forced to navigate through a familiar area in the game, but this time without any of the skills or abilities you have been using throughout the entire game. Even the ability to run is lost. This provides a contrast to the earlier sections where you're able to cut down the enemies and navigate this area with ease. Navigating through the area in this state is incredibly difficult and frustrating, but that's kind of the point. The game is forcing the player to use the damaged android's limited functions to force the player to feel how the android is feeling. The game wants the player to feel helpless and frustrated just as the player character is. Because the story wants to elicit these emotions at this point, the game goes all out using its mechanics to reinforce the aspect of the narrative that is being driven here. Most games would just have you watch something like this or maybe mash a button really hard or QuickTime events, but Nier Automata isn't afraid to take players out of their comfort zone. It completely risks being fun to drive home a point. Besides this marriage of gameplay and narrative Automata provides, it also has an amazing story and characters and fun, high-paced gameplay. But I felt like a lot of people have covered these pretty sufficiently at this point, as the game's been out for a few months. I wanted to talk about these neat things Automata did to blend its narrative and gameplay, as I've seen a lot of people talk about Ludonarrative Dissonance, but rarely is Nier Automata brought up as a great example of ludonarrative resonance, at least from what I've seen. The only game I've seen talked about at length in this regard is Undertale. Hopefully I was able to point out some cool stuff you may not have thought about, or if you haven't played Nier Automata already, maybe I've convinced you. Let me know any thoughts you had on any of this, or if you think ludonarrative of resonance is worth further exploring in gaming, as I've seen people with mixed opinions on the subject, some people thinking games just need to be fun, it's a whole debate, maybe I'll talk about it later. And if you thought this video was worth your time, maybe consider sharing it with someone who'd be interested. Thanks for watching.